right, Madisonville, how are we doing today? Good to be with you. Thanks for coming out. I am so grateful. We drove in from College Station this morning. We had an amazing town hall meeting in Rockdale last night. I now know why they call it Rockin' in Rockdale. The place was packed to the rafters. So much energy, so much body heat, right? We were sweating through our clothes, down through our shoes. We had such a good time. Luke Warford had kicked us off. Chairman Inahosa was there. And now I get to be with you all. And the drive, you all have made it probably a million times, right? From College Station, Bryan, to where we are right now in Madisonville. I turned to Cynthia and I said, now I know why they made that Clint Eastwood movie about this county. And she said, actually, that was Iowa. Not Texas. But they should have made it about Madison County, Texas. This place is far more beautiful than any other place that I've been to in any other part of the country. And it's reflected in the faces that I see here right now and these extraordinary public servants that you have. Councilmember Davis and Councilmember Inahosa so warmly welcoming us into this community and making sure that they serve in these nonpartisan positions. You know, not Democrat, not Republican, just focus on Madisonville and delivering for the community. We say, no me importa, does not matter what party you belong to. If you're a Republican and you're here, we're grateful that you are. If you're a Democrat, you're welcomed as well. Independents, we want you to come out too, but this one is for each and every single one of us. And the reason that I'm so excited and so encouraged is because we're going to win this election. We're going to win it. We're going to win it because we are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. We're going to win it because we're going to have the back of every public school educator, every classroom teacher, every counselor, every librarian. We're going to fight to pay them enough so they work just one job instead of 2 or 3. In Madison County, this is not right, folks. School teachers here are underpaid by $8,000 a year against the national average. No wonder so many are working that second job or that third job. And the retired school teachers, librarians, counselors, support staff, the folks who dedicated the best years of their lives in service to this community, teaching those kids, stoking their curiosity so that they would have a lifelong love of learning. They have not had a cost of living adjustment since the year of our Lord, 2004. And yet costs have gone up for them every single year. I mean, you name something right now under Greg Abbott, it is more expensive. Your utility bills, $45 a month more after that genius couldn't keep the lights on in the energy capital of the world. He passed the buck on to you and to me. Your property taxes up $20 billion since this guy took office. That's a 40% increase. And then when he thought he'd score some political points at our expense by shutting down all U.S.-Mexico trade for more than a week, maybe not realizing that 2/3 of the produce that we eat is imported from Mexico. And when that stuff was rotting on those international bridges, your price to buy groceries went through the roof in this state. So for those retired teachers, let's make sure you have a cost of living adjustment every single year going forward. Let's get rid of the WEP, the windfall elimination provision. 3 people here know what I'm talking about, but for the rest of you, what this means is that even if you've been this extraordinary public servant, teaching in these classrooms, sacrificing for these kids, and you've also worked in the private sector, paying into Social Security every quarter like every other person does, you will not be able to draw down your earned benefit, your earned retirement. The only thing that I can come up with as an explanation for why they put this into law is that at some point in the distant past, retired teachers were getting filthy rich in the state of Texas at public expense. We were sick and tired of seeing them in their big mansions, lighting their millions of dollars on fire, flushing it down the toilet, and we thought we'd step in and do something about it. There's no good reason for this, but I think you understand, and especially those of you who are parents of young people who want to be public school educators, especially if you are one of those young people who's going to A&M right now, for example, and you want to go into the classroom, It's hard to make that decision. And if you see your grandparents struggling and having to work into their old age to be able to support themselves on this TRS retirement, right? It's tough when you see your mom or dad in the classroom today being treated with such disrespect by the sitting governor, because it's not only the underpay and the lack of investment in TRS for the retirement of those teachers, it's forcing you to perform to this high stakes, high pressure, standardized test, literally taking days, weeks, sometimes months out of classroom education to prepare young people to take a test. You know, we named our kid, our oldest, Ulysses, because we didn't have the guts to name him Odysseus. My favorite book growing up was The Odyssey. When I meet high school seniors and juniors today who are reading the abridged version of that book, because their teacher has to set aside so much time to prep them to be able to take this STAR test, I think, where have our priorities gone? The teachers will say the same thing to me, and many of them, in fact, thousands of them, are leaving the profession today. They said, listen, I didn't do this for the money for sure, the fame or the glory. I take that second job on. I went into debt to get the education to be in this classroom in the first place. And now you don't trust me to teach to these kids. You're going to tell me which version of history I'm allowed to teach. You want me to turn in the parents of transgender kids for child abuse to boot? I'm trying to keep these kids alive right now. I want to focus on them and make sure that they have kids. That's why together, when we win this, we're going to cancel the STAR test so that you can focus on this kid and make sure that you're delivering for them in the way that you want to be able to deliver for them. I want to make sure that when we think about others who have served this community in this country, especially those women and men in uniform who put their lives on the line, the fewer than 1% who signed up to enlist since 9/11, fewer than 1% of our fellow Americans have decided that they are going to serve this country since we were attacked on that day in 2001. And overwhelmingly, they come from communities just like this one. Not only does rural Texas produce the food, the fiber, the fuel upon which we depend, and which is the engine of the Texas economy, we also produce right here in communities like this one, the women and men who disproportionately sign up and say, I want to serve. I'm going to put my life on the line. In fact, I'm willing to lose it for this country. I'll sign an oath, not to a president, not to a political party, not to anybody who's in power, but to our Constitution, to our democracy, and to our way of life. And yet, in this great state, if you ask me for my money, the greatest in the Union, right now, tonight, there will be hundreds of veterans who will be sleeping on the side of roads, underneath bridges, benches in parks. We have a $2 trillion economy in Texas. It's the 9th largest on planet Earth. It is not for lack of resources that we are not there for them right now. It is a lack of political will and follow through on our part, right? A government of, by, and for the people. This one is on all of us. So here are a few things I want to do to make sure that we as Texans, not Democrats, not Republicans, but Texans, live up to our end of the bargain. One, let us spare no expense, pay any price, move any burden to make sure that every single returning veteran has a roof over their head when they come back to this country, when they live in this county, when they come back to be here in the state of Texas. We can afford to do that. When we do that, their ability to succeed now in civilian life increases exponentially. When you have that reliable place that you go home to at the end of every day, a place that you can put on every job application form, every student loan application form for that matter, your whole world becomes brighter, your options widen up. Second, I've learned this from the Vietnam era veteran who came back to this community in 1968, in 1972, more than 50 years ago in almost every case, from a war that this country never fully understood and really never fully supported. They came back not to ticker tape parades or thank you for your service or a pat on the back or can I buy you your meal. They came back to indifference at best. And we know this and it's embarrassing to us, but the outright hatred of so many of their fellow Americans. And yet, nonetheless, they got after it, put their heads down, raised their kids, built up this community, worked those jobs, paid their property taxes, played by the rules. And yet this country took 40 years, 4 decades, to recognize their exposure to Agent Orange as a presumptive condition for the cancers that they had, the diseases from which they were dying, the struggles that they had when they came back to our communities. Those Vietnam-era veterans have not only shared that story with me, but they've asked all of us to make sure that we never treat another generation of veterans in the same way. So, here's another thing that I propose, reflecting what I've heard from you. We know that those fewer than 1% who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, in Somalia, in Yemen, in Syria, in all these countries half the world away, where we still have women and men deployed tonight, where it is tonight already. So many of them have been exposed to these toxic burn pits, where we are burning medical waste, body parts, toxins, chemicals, literally God only knows what. And our fellow Americans, our fellow Texans are breathing this stuff in. And then when they come back to our communities, they're having a hard time breathing when they're on the job, or when they're at home with their kids, or when they're just trying to live. I know that the Senate and the House have made some progress, and that's in no small part thanks to veterans from Texas who pushed them to do this. But listening to that Vietnam-era veteran who says, let us not wait 40 years to do the right thing for men and women in Texas today, I propose we stand up a toxic burn pit registry right here in the state of Texas. I want to tell you that your next land commissioner, Jay Claber, has been working on a proposal to run that out of the Texas Land Office right now to make sure that we use these extraordinary resources to connect every veteran to the care that they need. And then last thing, we're losing the lives of far too many of these veterans. We have a suicide rate, and I know we don't like to talk about suicide, but if we don't talk about suicide, we're not going to reduce the level of suicide in this state, especially among veterans. A suicide rate nationally, it's 20 to 22 a day, every single day. Those men and women who serve this country. We're losing Vietnam-era veterans, that great generation I keep talking about, faster than any other. Here's what they're telling me. Hey, Beto, I came back with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, the signature conditions and wounds of service to this country. And the VA might want to prescribe me an opioid to which I can become addicted and from which I might die. And that's not the way that I want to go out. So there is something that helps me to feel better, that manages my condition and my symptoms, that increases my appetite so I can keep weight on my bones, that allows me to sleep at night, and it's called marijuana or cannabis. But if I use that, if I buy that, if I carry that in the state of Texas, I'm a criminal in the eyes of the law. And in fact, you and I, spend $500 million a year locking up people for possession of this substance in this state right now. We also lose out on another $500 million that we could gain if we tax the controlled, regulated sale of cannabis. So, for that veteran, for my role as your fiduciary as governor, for the criminal justice dynamic of this, given the disproportionate representation of black and brown Texans behind those bars for possession of that substance, we're going to legalize marijuana in Texas. And we're going to expand the arrest record to those who serve time for possession of that substance. So it's legal almost everywhere. One of the last things that I want to share with you in terms of the big ideas that I hope bring us together is the ability to see a doctor. Now, many of us, and I'll say sometimes myself included, take this for granted. I have been so fortunate and so lucky in my life to have insurance. But I also understand it was really just a matter of fortune and luck that I had health insurance. There was nothing better or worse about me. It was that I had an employer, and then I was a small business owner that could afford to cover me for whatever it is that I might have needed. And yet we have more people in this state uninsured than any other state in the country. And what that means is we're 51st in the nation, behind every other state in the District of Columbia, in the ability to see a mental health care provider. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but we looked at the official statistics here in Madison County. We do not have a full-time psychiatrist. We have very little mental health care access in this community. What that means is that like almost every other county in Texas, your largest provider of mental health care services right now is the county jail. The largest inpatient mental health care facility in the great state of Texas is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. At meetings like these, I've met people just like those of us who are here, who will tell me about a family member with untreated schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression, who will literally try to get arrested on purpose to be taken to the one place they are guaranteed any kind of care at all. Not the kind of care that we would want for ourselves or for our family members, but you understand the level of suffering and desperation that these folks are going through. Not only is that immoral and unconscionable and unacceptable to you and to I, but it's also extraordinarily expensive. It's like $100 to $120 a night, depending on the county you're in, to keep someone locked up just because they don't have health care. For a fraction of that, we can connect them with a provider, hire more mental health care providers right here in Madison County. In fact, grow our own. Pay for the medical school education of young women and men who live here on condition that they come back here and practice medicine. And we do a lot of that by expanding a program that we came up with in the first place in 1965. That's the year that the first Texas president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, signed Medicaid into law. He wanted to make sure that no one was too poor or unfortunate or unlucky to be able to be healthy enough and well enough to live to their full potential, to realize their promise and their genius, and make sure that all of us get to benefit from it as a result. There's a deal right now on the table. We just have to take yes for an answer. The federal government will send us our own money back, okay? Not the stuff that grows on trees or falls from the sky, but the federal income taxes that you have paid up to DC. They'll send $10 billion of that back to this state. We'll reopen some of these closed rural hospitals, like the one I learned about last night in Rockdale. We'll be able to hire more of our own in communities like this one. Ensure that there's more mental health care opportunities. Reduce the rate of death by diabetes, and the fact that people are still dying of that in Texas in 2022, more than 100 years after insulin was invented. And the fact that we lead the nation in the number of kids who die from diabetes right now. All of that can be made better by just doing the right thing. And the kicker, we expand Medicaid, and we will reduce your property taxes. I'll work with Janet Dudding on this, but here's the idea. Right now, when that untreated person with schizophrenia or diabetes or any condition that would benefit from preventative and consistent care, when they finally get sick enough, they're going to go to the hospital. They're going to go to the clinic. They're going to try to see some doctor or provider to reduce their suffering. But the outcomes are going to be much worse than they would have been. They've been able to get in earlier. And the care is going to be exponentially more expensive. And even if they don't have a dime to their name or an insurance card in their wallet, that bill doesn't go away. It just gets passed on to you in higher property taxes as you pay for uncompensated indigent care in your counties. Now, we expand Medicaid, that cost to you goes away, and that pressure on your tax bill begins to come down. When we couple that with what we're going to do by raising the amount the state of Texas is going to pay to fund public schools, to fund teacher retirement, to fund teacher salary, so that the local school board doesn't have to raise your property taxes, we're really going to be able to offer some relief from inflation. So think about this. Think about a governor and a government with these other great statewide nominees you just heard from. Think about the city council all partnering together to work on the big things that are good, not for Democrats, not for Republicans, not for independents, but for all of us. Making sure that everyone who needs to can see a doctor, as we just talked about. Making sure that we don't lock anybody up for possession of a substance that's legal in most of the rest of the country, if not the world at this point. Making sure that we do our part for our veterans who've done their part for all of us. ensuring that we have the backs of our educators and our retired educators, and most importantly, the kids in the schools and in those classrooms, and then investing in these kinds of communities that are so often overlooked as to be forgotten by those who are in power in Austin, Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that Greg Abbott holds town hall meetings like these here in Madisonville, where he talks about what he wants to do for you and then listens to you about what we can partner on together. So when you leave here, and folks say, hey, I know you went to go see Beto on Saturday morning. What was this guy all about? Say, he talked about world-class public schools. He talked about expanding Medicaid so everybody can see a doctor. He talked about investing in our community so we can attract the best kinds of jobs for our young people so that they want to stay here or move back here. It was common sense, bipartisan, big things. That's the contrast to the governor that you have right now. I mean, not only can he not keep the lights on or the power going because he's more interested in his donors, more interested in those energy companies and pipeline CEOs and the traders who made $11 billion off our suffering and pain last February. He's just unwilling or unable to do the things that we need to make it better. I don't think he's evil. I don't think he wants to harm us. I just don't know that he cares enough about the people of Madisonville to actually show up and deliver for you. I will, and I'll come back here as your governor to be held accountable by you. I'll be in this room right here. You ask me any questions about anything that we have talked about today, you're going to have a better government for it. Very last thing before we turn the microphone over to you so I can hear what's on your mind. If you want to be part of this, if you want to be part of this victory, we're going to need to talk to your neighbors, to your family members, and to your friends. You're going to be so much more effective at that than I ever will. You know, imagine that your neighbors see a television ad from Beto O'Rourke or Luke Warford or Janet Dudding or any of these statewide nominees. It's 30 seconds, it's a minute, maybe they tune in, maybe they tune it out, but they say, you know what, that person doesn't know me. That's just a politician on TV. Now imagine it's you who shows up at your neighbor's door. And you knock on the door and they open it and you say, hey, my name's Beto, I'm here because I'm a retired school teacher and I have not had a cost of living adjustment in 18 years. And I'm struggling, I'm working 2 jobs in my old age to be able to get by right now. And I just don't think it's right. And I'm having a hard time talking my granddaughter into entering the profession right now. This guy, Beto, he's going to fight for us. He's going to ensure we have that cost of living adjustment. He's going to support my granddaughter when she goes into that classroom, treat her with the dignity and respect that she deserves. Can we count on your support in this election? Now listen, I didn't say anything about any Democratic Party talking point. No bullet points from this speech. It's your own words from your own heart, matching their own ears, and making a connection that is profound and transformational. If you're willing to do that, we will win this election. And there are a number of people in yellow vests who are distributed all across the room. And before you leave, each of them is going to try to talk to each of you and ask if you'll sign up for a shift knocking on doors. Now listen, I know it's hot out there. I know that this is not always fun. I know there can be some awkward conversations at the door. But if you really care at this moment, I promise you this as well. There's nothing more fulfilling than a full day of knocking on doors. You're no longer on the sidelines watching this train wreck happen to the state of Texas. This attack on women's bodily autonomy or people's ability to marry the person that they want to marry, or 10 weeks and counting and nothing having been done since those children were shot in Uvalde. You are now part of the solution. You're going to ensure that we get the change that all of us deserve. So I sure hope that you'll join me in this effort. Sign up to knock on these doors and help us win this historic election. Thank you for coming out today. Looking forward to winning with you. All right, Miss Cynthia Connell's got a microphone. She's over here. She's got this second microphone. If you raise your hand, she will bring it over to you and make sure that we get as many people into the conversation as possible. And again, we want to hear from everyone. Republican, Democrat, Independent, all are important to us. We want to know what's most important to you. All right, Ms. Connell.
And then I'll just ask you, please keep it to one question so I can get to as many hands up as possible.
Hi, my name is Anastasia Hickley. I'm a first-time voter and I'm environmental activist of 3 years and an up-and-coming environmental scientist. I have a few questions for you, but I'll stick to one. What would you do to help aid the fight for climate change?
Thank you for being here. And what I loved about Luke Warford's speech, and what I love about our colleague Jay Claybrook, who's running for land commissioner, is their candidacies are premised on the question that you just asked. That not only do we have a very short window within which to act to avert the worst consequences of climate change, but on the flip side, on the positive side, no state has greater capacity to meet this challenge than ours. You think about those who work in the oil and gas industry, for example, about whom I am so damn proud. Because not only did I drive here in a Toyota Tundra that was made in San Antonio that burns gasoline, and that came from this state, but they have secured the energy independence of this country from the rest of the world. I'm a lot older than you, old enough to remember when we were going to war half the world away to secure our energy supply lines to this country. No more having to do that, and Texas made it possible. Imagine bringing that same innovation and ingenuity to bear on the next generation of energy. So geothermal, which is renewable, right? It doesn't harm our climate and has a one-to-one skill set match with oil and gas drilling. These aren't jobs that are being replaced. This is knowledge, expertise, and experience that is being shared so that we can innovate and dominate the rest of the world. Wind, solar, hydrogen, battery storage, technologies that I probably can't even dream up right now, but will be dreamed up by you and by others. I want Texas to own the future. The other side of this, as we've been driving, Chris will tell me, I think this is our 19th day on the road of this 49-day push. So 19 days straight, I've just seen a few sprinkles of rain along the way. And I've been in far west Texas, I've been in the Panhandle, I've been in North Texas, I've been behind the Pine Curtain in East Texas, I've been in South Texas, I'm here with you today. We're going through record drought throughout this state, caused not by God, not by Mother Nature, compounded by our excesses, our emissions, and our inaction in the face of the facts. If you know anybody in Houston, or Port Arthur, or Beaumont, more rain fell from the sky in 2017 in that August than has ever been recorded in the history of written records in North America. We both understand the consequences of climate change and the opportunities better than anyone. So I want to make sure that Luke, Jay, and I, and Janet all partner with you on the solutions to this. Embrace this. Not only do we avert the catastrophe, we create the high-paying, high-skill, high-value jobs right here in this state, and we own the future. Thanks for asking. Appreciate you so much.
Hi, my name is Richard Traylor. I'm from Walker County. I gave you a book at the NRA protest about my aunt, Minnie Fisher Cunningham. Do you remember that?
I do. I still have it. I have to admit to you, I have not read it yet.
That was my question, if you had a chance to read it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. And I'll make sure that we do. I'll make sure that we do. Thank you.
Kenneth Hutchins. I'm a retired Houston firefighter, retired police officer. What are you going to do as governor? How would you eliminate the WEP?
Yes.
Let's work with everyone on this. Just to bring everyone back up to speed, the WEP, the Windfall Elimination Division, whose intent was to stop double dipping by public sector employees in the state of Texas, but has really forced many of them to work well into their retirement. It's making it really hard for us to recruit and attract the next generation of public servants. Some people may worry, hey, this is a Democratic proposal or pipe dream, it's not going anywhere. But I think of those retired school teachers and firefighters and police officers and state employees who live in rural communities represented by Republicans. There's the political will out there and the popular sentiment to get this done. So I want to make sure that we have a table at which we've got Republicans and Democrats alike sitting. That we all reach out to our networks. And again, we say regardless of the letter next to your name or who you voted for governor in the first place, we have an historic opportunity to do the right thing right now. We work with our federal partners in the United States Congress. Again, Republican and Democrat to make sure that we get this done. I think given the attack on teachers and public servants that we have in this state right now, there is going to be a reaction. Let's make it a positive one. I'll do everything I can through any executive action and opportunities I have unilaterally as governor, but ultimately it's going to require some level of cooperation and even consensus to get this done. But given the popularity of this issue, as I've talked about it across the state, I think the public will is there. We're going to have the political leadership that can get it done as well. I appreciate you asking. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mi nombre es Carlos Espina. I grew up here in the Brazos County, close to here. As we know, there's 1.6 million undocumented people in the state of Texas, many of whom live in this area. You didn't mention it in your speech, but I want to know what you would do for undocumented communities here in Texas, and specifically, would you support driver's licenses for undocumented people like is done in California, New York, and over other 20 states? Thank you.
Carlos, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for coming out. This is what I would like to do, and I hope what we would all like to do for all of us, right? One of the things that you're going to hear over the course of this election, when you try to bring up the grid that's failed and still isn't fixed, or the CPS system with 32,000 kids in it that's the worst run foster care program in America, or low teacher pay, or the WEP, or anything that actually really matters to people, the governor's going to try to distract you by saying we've got an invasion at our border. These Mexicans, these Hondurans, these Salvadorans, these Guatemalans, they're coming over and they're coming to get us. And that's a paraphrase, but here's the thing that he actually said. Texans, we must defend ourselves. We must take matters into our own hands. There's a guy in North Texas in 2019 who was listening loud and clear, bought an AK-47, drove it 650 miles to El Paso, and slaughtered 23 people in my hometown in a matter of minutes. The manifesto he posted before that massacre said that he had come to repel that invasion that he'd been hearing about of Hispanics who were coming in to take over and to replace him. This is really dangerous rhetoric. And it's on all of us to address the underlying issue so that demagogues like Greg Abbott can't continue to vilify communities of immigrants, endangering them, really endangering all of us. So here's my proposal. Instead of these stunts, like the border wall, the few miles of it that he has built, we're involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard, including people right here in Madison County, who have not even a week to say goodbye to their family and their kids, their community, their job, potentially losing their job for a one-year deployment on the border that is costing us billions of dollars. 8 of those Guard members have died, by the way, unfortunately, tragically. 4 of them have killed themselves. 4 of them have died in mysterious circumstances. None of them were killed by an immigrant coming over the border. Here's what I propose instead of those stunts. The solutions that you and I are going to come up with together. Let's address those who are trying to come to this country right now. We say to them, we welcome you, but you must come here in a legal, orderly, and safe way. And that's not happening right here today. So on our side, we're going to make sure that if you want to work in the state of Texas and take a job that no one born in this state is willing to do, go into the cotton gin in Roscoe, for example. 46 jobs in that gin. They cannot pay enough for anybody born in Roscoe or Sweetwater or anywhere else in Texas to take it. Immigrants come here for the privilege of working that job, so I've got this shirt on my back right now. Same with those who are picking onions in Brownsville today, or a little bit later. The season isn't ripe yet. So if you want to come here and do that, I want to make sure there's a legal, orderly, safe path. That doesn't exist right now. Try getting an employer to sponsor you right now to be able to, if you're the employer, try jumping through all of the hoops and paying the money and being able to afford to do that. Doesn't justify this, okay? Doesn't make it all right, but I understand why people do what they are doing today. So let's give them a path that allows them to do it legally. If you're coming to join your family, you've been separated by your family. They live here right now in Madison County. You live in Mexico. The wait time to get in the back of the line and do this legally is 20 years long. Now listen, nothing justifies breaking the law, jumping that line, coming in between ports of entry. I don't condone it. I don't accept it, but I understand why people do it. So lift the per country cap make sure that there is a legal, safe, orderly, and much quicker way to be able to get here. If you're trying to claim asylum and you can't take your baby girl back to El Salvador because they'll kill her, they'll rape her, they'll put her into a gang. If that were my daughter, I'd do exactly what folks are doing right now in terms of this country and apply for asylum as well. So right now, your asylum case takes 6 years to adjudicate. And we're forcing you to wait in the refugee camps or just out on the streets in Ciudad Juarez, in Pueblo Laredo, in Reynosa, and these other border communities. 6 years to adjudicate it. Look, it doesn't condone it, doesn't make it okay, but understand if you're with your baby girl and you're worried about her getting kidnapped, you're just feeding her, and you want to come in between ports of entry to get to this country, I understand why you do it. Doesn't make it okay, I don't think people should, but that's what's happening today. So what if Texas took the lead in rewriting our immigration laws to reflect our values, our needs, and who we are as a state of immigrants? A Texas-based guest worker program. Come here and work, and then we want to make sure that you have safe, legal, orderly passage back to your home country to be there with your family so that you're not here undocumented trying to draw your family up here, because that's the only way you all can be together. I've talked about lifting the per country caps on asylum claims, not 6 years, but how about 6 weeks or 6 days if we can hire up enough people to be able to do that. You mentioned those who are already here in the state. Let me pick one category that's super important to me. And those are the dreamers, the DACA beneficiaries, whose moms and whose dads, in some cases, brought them here when they were months old or a couple of years old, and are just as American as anyone else here in this room, just as Texan as I or my kids, even though my kids are 5th generation. They're contributing to our success. They're paying far more in taxes than they're ever going to be able to draw down in benefits. What if we led the way in making sure that every dreamer has a safe, orderly, legal, and quick path to citizenship so that they have that driver's license, so that they can go to that university, so that they can serve in the United States military, so that they can be an entrepreneur and create jobs. And then for everyone else who wants to do well by being here, who wants to contribute more than they're ever going to take, who's improving not just our economy, but the security and safety of our communities. I say that as a proud El Pasoan, one of the safest cities in America, not despite, but because it is a city of immigrants. I want to make sure that you too can get right with the law, and that we have a legal, orderly, safe path for you to be able to do that. We do all that, folks, and then the legitimate concerns that you and I have about the border. The fact that there are some people who will want to traffic drugs like fentanyl into this country, which will kill our fellow Texans. That there are some people who want to traffic human beings, which may end in the deaths of those human beings. That's a legitimate concern that all of us have. But if we take those who want to work, those who want to join family, those who are seeking asylum off the table because we've offered them a safe, legal, orderly path to apply, then we can find those who intend to do us harm and stop them before they ever come into this country. I apologize for the long answer, but it's an important issue, and I'm glad that you raised it, Carlos. That's how we get to solutions instead of stunts. Thank you.
Well, I'm not an angel from Montgomery, but I'm a very old person, according to John Prine. Because I think, except for my husband, I'm probably the oldest person in this room, and my first campaign was for John Kennedy. Very quickly yesterday, I was in Brenham, and we had a very passionate plea from a veteran's wife about the circumstances of their losing their home. How can we name the border wall for what it is? Trump Tower Southwest. And make everybody in Texas, all these departments who have been assigned tasks to find money for that project, which is a debacle. How can we make them see how many veterans would have been served by all of that money? How many people in small businesses would have been helped? How many schools, and that's going to be our next big issue, as everybody with their 401k or whatever it is doesn't have enough money now to send their children or grandchildren to private schools, then we're supposed to pay for it. As a public school employee for 41 years, I retired in 2005, so I don't get any benefits. And every time my husband gets an increase in Social Security, our other benefits are subtracted. So we make 66% of what we made when we retired. So how can we, they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. How are we going to make the people in Texas not vote for what they're listening to us last?
Thank you for being here. Yeah. What a great question. We all appreciate the John Prine reference too. Rest in peace. I mentioned earlier, the governor really seeks to distract us, keep us from doing the big things that we're capable of. Everything that you just mentioned, making sure that retired public servants are able to enjoy their retirement and not have to work through it. Funding the ability to see a doctor. A quarter of the people who live in Madison County cannot get online, cannot use the internet. Half of rural Texas cannot reliably get online. We've been in some communities where it's 5% of the community can get online. If you are a cattle raiser in this community, try getting what you bring to market to the seller, to the buyer, if you can't get online. If you're lonely and you're single, try finding a date if you can't get online, right? It's very, very, very hard to do. We should be investing in that. But we've got a governor who, we asked him about that, tries to distract us by looking at other things. Be afraid of the immigrant. Be afraid of the transgender child. Be afraid of our history. I'm going to introduce this term to you you've never heard before, CRT. Never heard the phrase literally in my life. I'm not the most educated man on the planet, but I'm pretty aware. I didn't know there was a thing called critical race theory, and I was even more surprised to know that they were teaching it in the 3rd grade. It turns out that they're not, actually. It is only ever taught when it is taught in graduate law school classrooms, but that doesn't matter to the governor. He'd love for you to be very afraid of this phrase that he just cooked up. And so she's asking a really good question. How do we get past all that deflection and distraction and back on the big things that we actually want to do together? It's this. You're looking at it right now. Sometimes folks will say, look, that's in my county, and that may be true in Madison. You go into the coffee shop, into the bar, into the hotel, and the TV's on, and if it's a news program, it's going to be Fox News. And when it's Fox News, they're going to caricature you. You're a socialist, you're a this, you're a that, you're your worst nightmare of what a Democrat is. How are you going to get past that? And the only way I know, this is not sophisticated, but I can get it, is to go to where people are and to be with them and to join together in conversations like these. But again, I'm going to make this appeal and ask you to join me in this, because I alone, even with Luke and Janet and this team that's here, we can only do so much. And we shouldn't expect the Democratic Party to carry the day at the end of the day, right? It's got to be people, and people talking and listening to people. I think this is, forgive me for this, but I think this is a radical notion. In the year 2022, when so many politicians, I think lazily, make their whole campaign about these canned, overproduced messages that are sent out over the airwaves, these talking points and these scare tactics that you see Greg Abbott using. The fact that we're willing to rely on one another, human to human, in-person conversations in meetings like these, or being at someone's door, man, that is powerful. In an age that we're so consumed by these digital devices, right? Everyone's on a screen. We're kind of self-selecting for people who already agree with us and will echo the sentiments that we already have. We live in neighborhoods sometimes we don't ever have to lay eyes on our neighbor or have an unguarded conversation, much less one about one of the two issues you're not supposed to talk about in polite company, the other one being religion. For us to do this right now is just so powerful and transformative. There are 83,000 people who have answered the calls so far, who signed up to knock on doors and have these conversations. We've already knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors. In June, it was over 100,000 doors in Texas. I think in July, we'll have to ask Catherine, but I think we exceeded 100,000 doors across Texas. If we had knocked on 100,000 doors in October, right leading up to the election when everyone's on fire about it, that would be something. But to do it in June and July is really saying something about how intensely we feel about this and the work that we're willing to do. So that is how we connect people with their self-interest in this election. We don't preach, We don't even just share what we think, we also listen to them and make the connection to November. So thank you for asking the question. Thank you for helping us, and I hope that you'll sign up with us in October. Then you walk for us, right? Awesome.
Hello, thank you for showing up here. For those that are in the audience that will have the luck to being born in this country, you don't know what you have. My brother and I immigrated here from Brazil for safety. My brother served 19 years in the U.S. Army as a paratrooper. I spent 16 years in the Marine Corps. And that's what we gave back to this country. Now, the lucky thing was that we got U.S. citizenship as soon as we finished our active duty. They don't offer that anymore. Not a bit. In fact, they are recruiting foreign nationals to serve in the American military, and at the end of their enlistment time, they're like, we're sorry, you don't get it. Now, the thing I want to ask, how do we defeat the tribalism that has arisen? I mean, I can remember my father, who was an immigrant from Sweden to Brazil, told us that the U.S. was a shining light on this planet. Don't feel that anymore. You know, the tribalism. I live over in Walker County. I supported you for your Senate race. I still have a bill.
Yeah.
Can I tell you how many people drive past me in Walker County and tell me I'm number one? In the last 9 months I've been there, I've only seen one other Beto sticker on a truck. I came up alongside of him, honked, he grimaced. I pulled up ahead of him so you can see my Beto signature, our sticker, and we were flashing lights at one another. So I found the only other noticeable Beto supporter in Walker County. Okay.
Yay! Good more.
How do we end this tribalism?
Yeah.
How do we, I mean, okay, I came back from my first tour of Vietnam in 1969. And I had junk and garbage and epitaphs. The only people that gave me rides to get back to New Orleans were truckers. And so at the end of that, I learned all about C.W. McCall and Breaker 101. I knew nothing about it. But it's the tribalism that scares me.
What a great question. I love that Cynthia, who's right next to you, just handed you a bunch more stickers so you can hand them out to more people and more drivers in Walker County. Just real quick on your first point, the gentleman's absolutely correct. Right now, women and men who've served this country in uniform, who are not U.S. citizens, have been deported, are living in other countries, have no access to the VA, cannot treat their PTSD, TBI, MST, any condition they have. They're willing to die for us, for our Constitution, for our democracy, and I really do think that at a minimum, there should be an offer of citizenship and the ability to stay in this country that they serve. So we're going to get that done. You know, whoever it takes to get that done. And the second thing on tribalism, let me just tell you a quick story. Cynthia and Chris and I, you know, I mentioned we've been on the road for the last 19 days. Nick, our campaign manager, has been with us for a few days. This amazing support team, folks in yellow vests, the folks who helped set this up, the advanced team. And what we've been struck by is that, especially in rural communities, there are folks who, and we see some out here today, who protest our visit, who may have Abbott signs up, who may want to say perhaps sometimes an unkind word to us as we're walking in. And what we've done at every turn in every community is we've invited those folks into the meeting. We said, come in, and I'll give you the microphone, and you can ask me a question, anything that's on your mind. And it's worked. I remember we were in Bowie, Texas. Not Bowie County, but Bowie, the city of Texas. And there were a bunch of protesters outside. It was a hot day. We invited them in. And we said, you can even keep their Abbott signs. You can hold them up. We don't care. We're just glad that you're here. And Cynthia gave a woman who had the Abbott sign the microphone to ask the first question. And she said, she listened to everything I'd said. And she said, you know, I'm a retired high school principal. And I hear you on this retirement issue. I hear you about the teacher shortage. In fact, though I'm a retired principal, I'm now subbing in the schools because we don't have enough kids. How are we going to work together to make sure that we can fund these higher salaries and this retirement? Really good question. Common ground that she and I found. We were in another community, even smaller, called Hemphill. A guy wearing a Make America Great Again cap and a Trump bright red t-shirt stands up and asks a really good question, kind of like Carlos did a second ago, about immigration. His parents immigrated from Canada, and he feels like they did it the right way. He's worried that people aren't following the law. How are we going to fix this? And we had a great exchange. We found some common ground. He came up afterwards. He shook my hand. He said, I may even vote for you. And he gave Cynthia a hug, which is awesome. It was really beautiful. So this finding common ground, defeating tribalism, is working so well that the Greg Abbott campaign just sent an email out to all of their supporters. And they said, listen, when you come to protest Beto's visit, don't go inside and actually listen to him, okay? Because too many of you are converting and coming over to him. So it's working, all right? Let's reach out to everybody.
Time for 3 more.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
My comment, and no, my question is, let's go to the state board of education for a minute. As far as the rural counties, okay? Do you ever see maybe a magnet school for the rural areas? Let's educate our people with cosmetology schools, LVN. This is my question to you this morning.
Yes, absolutely. I'll add one more to it. When we were in Rockdale last night, again, just an amazing meeting. I was talking about the trades. I was talking about unions. And I was talking about the apprenticeship you can enter as a member of the IBEW, as an electrician. 5 years in that apprenticeship. You are earning money at the age of 17 or 18 while you're learning this trade, this skill. You graduate to become a journeyman or a journeywoman, and you're commanding a really big salary. And you can do that anywhere. You can do it here in Madisonville, you can do it in New York, you can do it anywhere. And this young man comes up to me at the end of the meeting. He says, I'm in my 2nd year in this apprenticeship program. And I said, great, are you doing it here in Rockdale? And he said, no, there's no longer that training here in my community. I have to drive, I forget how far, 30, 45 minutes, an hour away to do that. Well, why don't we have more opportunities like that in Madisonville? You get your high school diploma, let's say, and then you also should be able to get 2 years of an associate's degree under your belt. And if that's in cosmetology, if it's working your way towards your nursing degree, your welder's certificate, that journeyman status as an electrician, a plumber, a steel worker, let's do that here in this community, because that's the best way not only to train those that we need to make sure that we can take care of us and build up our community even greater than it already is, but also to keep young people in Madisonville or give them a reason to move back here if they've moved away, or attract other young people who may never have heard of Madisonville until they saw Beto O'Rourke show up in their town and say, this is the most beautiful community, you gotta come out here and see it. But those opportunities do not exist in too many of our rural communities. So not only do I want to make sure that we fund that, but I mentioned this earlier. If you want to be a nurse, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be one of those psychiatrists that we need in this community, what if we invested in your medical school, your nursing school education? You take on no debt on the condition that you move back here to Madisonville, you practice medicine, you take care of this community that nurtured your success in the first place for a minimum of, say, 6 years. It is such a good deal. And I want to make sure we make the investment in that. Thanks for that. Hi there.
Good morning. I'm Nick Bird. I'm from right down the road in Grimes County, so I feel your pain with the stickers because it's a little bad out there.
Cynthia's going to give you more stickers.
So my question is this, as I'm sure we all know, the rights of bodily autonomy for women, for trans folks like myself, they're being taken away. So what sort of plans do you have in place to protect our ability to form our families the way we want?
What a good question. Thank you very much. It makes me think of the Vietnam veterans question about tribalism right now, right? In Abbott's Texas today, it's you or me. If you're trans, he's going to try to make everyone else afraid of you. If you're an immigrant, You're the enemy, you're the invader, you're the thing that we've got to guard against, to take matters into our own hands, to defend ourselves from. If you want to teach the true whole story of Texas history, he's against you. He's going to attack you as a teacher. It's you or me. And we got to get back to something that the gentleman just asked about, this tribalism, where it used to be you and me. We can have our differences. No two people are ever going to agree on everything all the time. All of us understand that, especially if we're married. But we can find enough common ground to get the job done at the end of the day. Do I think that Greg Abbott cares one way or another about transgender Texans? I really don't. But it is a very useful distraction from the things that we should be focused on right now going forward. Do I really think he cares one way or another about marriage equality, which is also going to come under attack right here in the state of Texas? Or this Don't Say Gay bill that they are proposing in the next legislative session? Or carting off books that have any reference to the LGBTQ community from our libraries? Attacking a population that already struggles when it comes to, especially for younger people, especially for younger trans kids, with feelings of self-worth and whether they belong in this state, whether they belong in this planet, whether they belong alive. Does he really want to harm them? Does he wake up in the morning saying, how can I make it more likely that they're going to try to take their own life? No, of course he doesn't. I just don't think he cares one way or the other. We got to get back to you and me, right? All of us here together. So here's the question that you just asked. How are we going to get this done? We've got to make sure that we're reaching out to people who reach different conclusions on things that we really care about, that are personally important to us, that we don't judge them, that we don't write them off, that we prevail on their power of empathy, something that sets us apart, I think, from most of the rest of the animal kingdom, right? We can imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. And when we do that and find what's common between us, it's much harder for me to hate on you or to want to hurt you. It's much easier for me to realize that I may unintentionally be doing harm to somebody that I now care about. As governor, I want to make sure that I speak with pride about every single one of us, that I elevate the stories, especially of the most vulnerable, of those who've been under attack for the longest in the state of Texas. I want to give every Texan the opportunity to do the right thing by and for one another. But that will also be matched by ensuring that we are not Pollyanna or naive about what's coming down the pipe. Because in addition to every woman in this state losing her right to make her own decisions about her own body, total abortion ban beginning at conception, with no exception for rape or incest, we know what follows behind. Justice Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court, in his concurring opinion, said, contraception, marriage equality, same-sex intimacy, literally reviving the sodomy laws in Texas and in the United States, those are next. And if that seems ridiculous to you, total ban on abortion 49 years after Roe versus Wade was decided seemed ridiculous to me not too long ago as well. We got to take these folks seriously for what they are saying right now. We've got to recognize that even winning this election on the 8th of November will be insufficient to the task at hand. We've got to make sure that we're in this fight every single day going forward until we have no more breath in our lungs, because the other side will be fighting to take back the protections for these rights every single day going forward until there's no more breath in their lungs. We labored too long under the impression that victories were final, whether it was Roe versus Wade in 1973, whether it was Obergefell and marriage equality not too long ago, whether it was the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in a state that's democracy is under attack more so than in any other. These victories are never final. The fight is never over. So, in addition to standing proudly with you and behind you and for you, I'm going to make sure that we lead this state to correct some wrongs that are already on the books right now. In this state, it is legal, even if it's not okay, to fire somebody because they're gay. It is legal, though not okay, to refuse to hire somebody because they're a member of the LGBTQ community. In this state, it is legal to deny abortion to a same-sex family. In a state that has 32,000 kids in this foster care system who are emerging more damaged than when they went in. We've got to change those laws that are on the books and live up to the thing that I think distinguishes us as Americans, which is this foundational premise that we are all created equal, and that we will be treated equally under the law. We've never quite gotten there, right? But I'd like to think we've never stopped trying. I would love for Texas to take the lead. Thanks for asking the
This woman has a question, and then Cedric has the last question.
Yes, we're originally from Santa Fe, Texas, and my son is a survivor of the mass school shooting there. Abbott looked us right in the eyes and said this would never happen again. My son joined the Army. He has been deployed to another country when Uvalde happened. He had a panic attack, wanting to know why our soldiers are protecting other countries and not our kids here. So my question is, what is the first thing you will do to protect our kids in schools?
Thank you for asking the question. We've got to begin by listening to you and your son, survivors. We've got to listen to the parents who were not so fortunate. You probably know Rhonda Hart, who lost her daughter Kimberly in the Santa Fe High School shooting in 2018. She and I have become good friends since then. She came up with a proposal called Safe Storage, which just says, and I think most of you probably already do this, but not everyone does, hence Santa Fe High School, that if you have a firearm in the house and you have young people in the house, keep that gun locked up, keep it safe. Too many times we've read about, seen, or maybe you all have experienced in your lives, a young child gets their hands on an unsecured firearm and accidentally shoots themselves or shoots somebody else in the house. Or in the case of Santa Fe, takes that unsecured firearm into that school and shoots other children in their classrooms. Where the only thing we want them to be worried about is whether they're going to pass that algebra test. Now they're worried about whether they're going to survive the school day. We got to listen to those parents in Uvalde, as I have, as probably you have as well, who say, why in the world can an 18-year-old buy an AR-15? Actually not an AR-15, two AR-15s, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and it'd be perfectly legal in the state of Texas. I've met other Vietnam-era veterans who told me that the AR-15 was originally designed, engineered, and sold to the United States military to be used in that conflict to penetrate an enemy soldier's helmet at 500 feet and to knock him down dead. For those kids to be up against essentially that same weapon without a helmet on their heads, not at 500, but at 5 feet. For the doctors who saw those kids afterwards to say the only way we could identify their bodies is by the shoes that they were wearing or the DNA swab we were able to do. Clearly, we have to change something, right? And those parents have said, hey, at a minimum, raise the age of purchase from 18 to 21. Buy us at least 3 more years for some kind of intervention. Some in the room might think, well, hey, Beto, criminals aren't going to follow the law. This kid in Uvalde, this young man in Uvalde, patiently waited for his 18th birthday. He didn't try to acquire the weapons at 15, 16, or 17. He turns 18, he walks into that gun store and buys those 2 weapons and those hundreds of rounds of ammunition. A universal background check, which is something that I learned about from listening to people in Midland, Odessa, who died, 8 of them, when a gunman went into a gun store, tried to buy an AR-15, was rejected because there's a background check there. But because we don't have a universal one in the state of Texas, he was able to buy from a private seller that same weapon and use it against people in that community. Red flag law is something that folks have suggested. The shooter who killed 23 people in El Paso, when he ordered that AK-47 and it came in, another weapon of war, his mom called the police department in Allen, Texas and said, something's wrong with my kid. I don't know what he wants with this weapon. She may have signaled other signs of distress, but there was no legal recourse for the police. So they said, I'm sorry, we'd love to help you, we can't, good luck. He drives that weapon to El Paso and murders 23 people. Red flag law that would allow law enforcement to intervene before it's too late and then restore that firearm to its owner once we've addressed any outstanding concerns could have prevented so many of these tragedies. If we were willing to do that and then listen to teachers and students and parents and administrators about what other steps we can take on their campuses, each one is individual. Is it fencing? Is it doors? Is it other security precautions that we can take? Well, let's partner with you at the state of Texas to make sure that you have the resources to be able to get it done. Is it, as the governor said, a mental health care issue. That's what he said the day after the Uvalde massacre. So we have a mental health care challenge here. Mentioned we're 51st in the nation on his watch. You may or may not know that he withdrew $211 million from the mental health care budget in April, the month before Uvalde, right? So if it is mental health care, then let's actually fund mental health care. There's no one thing that will prevent every single one of these instances of gun violence. The other side will use that as an excuse to do nothing at all. They'll say, but what if? And then there's this, and this exception, in this instance. And so let's agree that we are still going to have challenges in this state, but there's nothing within us that should accept that 5 of the worst mass shootings in United States history have taken place in this state in the last 5 years. And you mentioned your child, your son, who's now serving our country, for which we are grateful. My 3 kids just started their school year last Monday, a sophomore, a freshman, a 6th grader in public schools in El Paso, the same ones that I went to. 10 weeks after Uvalde, 4 years after Santa Fe. They are no safer, no less likely to encounter an armed gunman, nor will their teachers, than we were back when you met with the governor 4 years ago. So we can hold our breath and hope that he's going to do something differently. But the very definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. We need change. The first step is winning this election. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, this is going to be our last question.
Buenos días. Buenos días. Mi nombre es Luis González. Le voy a hacer la pregunta en español. ¿Qué está haciendo para poder mantener el voto de los jóvenes? Mi hijo tiene 21 años. En las pasadas elecciones contra Cruz, él votó por ti. ¿Qué estás haciendo para mantener el voto joven y que no se desilusionen del Partido Demócrata? Porque él cree en ti y él no pudo estar hoy aquí porque está en República Dominicana. Le cancelaron el vuelo y hoy vuela para acá. Pero a él le gustaría haberte conocido y saludarte. Y la pregunta es, ¿qué estás haciendo para mantener el voto joven y que no se desilusionen de las promesas que se hacen? Gracias.
Gracias, señor González. Le agradezco para la pregunta y yo también quiero hablar con su hijo. Si puede pasar su número de teléfono a Cintia, vamos a llamar después de la junta. Pero necesitamos estar con los jóvenes. Tenemos algunas y algunos aquí con nosotros hoy, pero también vamos a las universidades en cada parte del estado. Esta mañana estábamos en Texas A&M, pero vamos a viajar a los otros durante el mes de septiembre. Y vamos a hablar sobre los temas más importantes para los jóvenes. La necesidad de sobrevivir en sus escuelas y en sus clases, y también para sus maestras y maestros. La necesidad de hacer algo sobre el cambio de clima que tenemos aquí en el estado de Texas. Pero escuchar a la gente que van a vivir con las consecuencias de nuestras decisiones por su vida entera. Por eso yo quiero contar en el voto de los jóvenes, pero primero es necesario trabajar con escuchar a la gente que van a decidir esta elección. Gracias para la pregunta y estar aquí, y también a su hijo. Just want to make sure, just to repeat this briefly in English, that we want to count on the votes of those young people, but the only way to do it is to show up for them first, to listen to them, to learn from them, very often to follow their lead, as we just heard from a young person who's working on climate change right now, and to make them part of the solution for something that they're going to have to live with longer than any of us who are here in this room. We can't take them for granted. We got to show up. Last thing that I'll say is it works when we do. In 2018, we had a debate within the campaign. You know, I wanted to go to college campuses. I wanted to go to senior high school classrooms. I wanted to be with young people. And smart people, smarter than I am on the campaign, said, Beto, that sounds nice, but young people don't vote. And we got limited time. It's a big state. It's 254 counties. Let's not waste it on these people who don't show up. The thinking on my part was, I probably wouldn't show up either if no one ever failed to show up for me, right? Like if we keep compounding this problem, it's like a catch-22. We don't show up for them, they don't show up for us, so we don't show up for them, they don't show up for us. Let's break that cycle and show up. And we went to all these college campuses that Mr. Gonzalez and I were just talking about right now. Young voter turnout in November of 2018 was up 504% from the previous midterm election. So when you show up for young people, they show up and leave. Madisonville, thank you for having us out here today. This is a huge honor to be with you. We are so grateful. I feel so good about the fact that we are running this race together and that we are going to win it together on the night of November 8th. Thank you very much. Let's go.